Tonight, America's war against ISIL. Today, before a Senate panel, top U.S. military commander said they haven't ruled out the possibility of sending in ground troops. This is House Republicans review President Obama's military strategy to try and dismantle the terrorist network. Then a funding flop for the Tappan Zee Bridge. The feds nixed a controversial loan Governor Cuomo was counting on. So what happens now, and is there a plan to pay for the new span? And later, the Roosevelts. Ken Burns has the celebrated New York president center stage once again. But has today's politics changed so much that it would prevent these men and their messages from making it to the White House today? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard Fresh. Thanks so much for joining us. Tonight we're going to begin on Capitol Hill, where Defense Department leaders spent the day trying to convince Congress to pay for new U.S. military operations in Iraq. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel and Joint Chiefs Chair General Martin Dempsey testified that the fight against ISIL would be complicated. ABC's Marcy Gonzalez reports on what they say must be done to win the war against the terror group.
America's top military leaders on Capitol Hill today, outlining President Obama's plan to combat the militant Islamist group ISIS. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Martin Dempsey telling the Senate Armed Services Committee he is open to the possibility of U.S. ground forces fighting alongside the Iraqi military.
There is no intention for them to do so. I've mentioned, though, that if I found that circumstance evolving, that I would, of course, change my recommendation.
With ISIS beheading 2 Americans and 1 British aid worker and threatening to kill another of its 5 Western hostages, military officials say beyond expanding airstrikes, more needs to be done to stop this terror group. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel urging Congress to fund President Obama's plan to train and arm Syrian opposition forces and Iraq's military.
This will not be an easy or a brief effort. It is complicated. We're at war with ISIL as we are with al-Qaeda.
Speaker of the House John Boehner saying he believes the president's strategy is sound, but may not go far enough.
If our goal here is to destroy ISIL, we've got to do more than train a few folks in Syria and train a few folks in Iraq and dropping bombs.
And again today, a White House spokesperson reiterated.
All right, Marcy Gonzalez reporting there for ABC. Now, the White House reiterating, as she was saying later in the day, that the president does not plan on using ground troops, despite what we heard from the testimony on Capitol Hill today. Now, Congress is set to vote on authorization and funding before the end of the month, but this is Congress, so naturally there's a hitch. The House is going to attach the authorization to a budget bill that's needed to avert an October 1st government shutdown, and neither party wants another shutdown before November's midterm elections, so lawmakers will get to somewhat mask their votes instead of voting yes or no on the ISIS plan. And that idea doesn't sit well with many. Let's see what our panelists tonight have to say. We've got a terrific panel. Michael Tobman is back with us. He is a Democratic political consultant. Dominic Carter is here, political journalist and author. C. Scott Vanderhoff, an attorney and former 5-term Rockland County executive. And Richard St. Paul is back with us after vacation, Republican strategist, former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. So I want to start with that vote that's coming by the end of this month and the fact that it's being stapled to the spending bill. This is done obviously to protect lawmakers to a certain degree. Well, I had to hold my nose and vote for it because we don't want to shut down. The question is, and I'll start with you, Michael, should it be an independent vote? Should it be separate from this spending bill?
It absolutely should be. I think members of Congress, as they're going into the midterm elections and they go back to their districts, should have to explain their vote and justify their decision. But there's a commercial on right now on Showtime because the popular TV show Homeland is coming back for another season. And in it, one of the characters says, "We haven't been fighting a 14-year war in Iraq. We fought a 1-year war 14 times." It's like Groundhog's Day, and it's immensely complicated, and it has been awful, the beginning, middle, and there's no end in sight. So members of Congress should have to go back to their districts and explain their position on this and what their plan is for either airstrikes or troops on the ground and an international coalition or not, and have the voters weigh in on their opinions.
But what should happen doesn't always happen because it seems like the president punted to Congress saying that, remember we were in an election year and the president saying, I have the authority to do this, but I want the support of Congress. And then Congress turning around now and saying, well, we're going to tie it to something else. So nobody wants to hold the political football, if you will, because every party involved is worried, Andrew, that this might be a third rail of politics.
Look, the Iraq War is very different from fighting terrorists where we find it, and terrorism where we find it. Obviously, ISIS, and we can't even get the name right, ISIS, ISIL, you know, let alone the strategy correct. So, I mean, if we can't get the name right, how are we going to get the strategy correct? Look, bottom line is, President Bush warned about pulling troops out of Iraq and the instability it would create. And now we're seeing those fruits, or those chickens coming home to roost. The important thing is, look, at some point in time, we may have to consider the ground troop option to stop this terrorist threat. And the president has to be, I think, willing to do that. And as we saw, some of his advisors talked about the possibility of ground troops. Now,
let me ask then, should this vote include the possibility of ground troops? Should the language of this authorization bill allow the president, give him the okay to use ground troops if he wants?
The language of the bill should authorize the president to take whatever action is necessary.
Ground troops included?
Ground troops included.
Scott?
Look, this is a threat. And before, we've already heard the possibility of threats coming to the United States based on ISIS terrorism. So we've got to stop the threat over there before it comes over here.
I think it should be a separate vote to answer your question. But I think the president's strategy is flawed. You will not be able to properly, effectively arm Syrian rebels. We don't even know who the leader is over there. There's no organization. And so people should stand up on the issue of supporting financial aid to support Syrian rebels that basically don't exist. You're not going to get them to fight on two sides, to fight ISIS and to fight against the regime. And I think that's the mistake the president is making. So having said that, I've said on the show and I'll say it again, there are combat units in Iraq now helping with those who are fighting ISIS. And ultimately that decision, you can tell by the testimony today, there's the great division within the military versus the civilian strategists here about what you can really do to eliminate the threat of ISIL, whatever we're going to call it for today. One thing I want to point out, though, is they will never be destroyed as an idea. It will come back. It will never, ever be destroyed. This is not a war against Nazi Germany where you have one side's wearing this particular uniform. And that's where the president makes a mistake. You can certainly close things down, you can shut them down, stop territorial expansion, but they cannot be defeated as an idea.
It sounds like you're both saying that you feel like the president's reaction is something of a knee-jerk reaction to public opinion shifting and to the videos that we've seen of the beheadings. Is that
absolutely?
Think about it. And his strategy was, and I'm getting frustrated about this. Look, he said, look, if Syria crosses this red line, then I'm going to take this particular action, and nothing happened. There was an ability to stop ISIS from growing a long time ago, and he did not respond to that. And this is what's happening now. We have beheadings of Americans and British citizens because of his lack of action. His approval rating is at 41%. People
I don't know that it was
do
a
not
lack of action
agree
then.
with his leadership. He has not taken leadership on these issues.
I don't think ISIL would agree with anybody's leadership in the
No,
United
I'm
States.
talking about American people and his leadership on international affairs.
Are these actors coming from, are they former Baathists from Iraq? Are they more conservative from Iran? Are they from Syria? Are they from Afghanistan or Pakistan or any of the former Soviet republics? So we have a transnational enemy here. And I don't know that there was ever a time where this wasn't kept under lid. It was when there were despots in all these countries like Libya and like Iraq that actually kept a handle on these things.
And that's a good point, Michael, because forgetting for the moment the president's popularity, they're pouring in through Turkey to help this. This is an international group that is now bound and determined to try to take as much land as they can. And the fact of the matter, if historically, is the United States has failed to train the Iraqi military, it's failed to work with Libya, it has failed in almost every attempt to do this, even those Syrians that we have tried to train. The record is not good here. And so when you take, this is not an organized army fighting the Bashar regime, this is a group of rebels who turn on each other. It is a very, very dangerous situation.
Got no time, but I just want to put Michael on the spot. Do you feel like this is a knee-jerk reaction from the president, or do you think this is plotted out and he knows what he's doing here?
I think the answer is both. I think that he thinks he knows what he's doing, but I think it is not as sophisticated enough or encompassing enough or international enough plan, because what we're really talking about is the Western world's relationship with the Islamic world. And it's immensely complicated, as the county executive said.
Andrew, I just want to say, to respond to my colleague, this didn't all start with President Obama. It started, the Iraq War, with his predecessor. So let's just keep that in mind. When we're talking about public opinion polls at 41%, let's remember historically that presidents in midterm election years, they don't do very well. So let's just remember he inherited, if you will, the Titanic. And so
6 years
I would
back.
love to let this flare up again, but I have no time for it because I got to get to a break. Up next, the feds derail Governor Cuomo's Tappan Zee funding plan. Does that mean that the funding will be a flop? Stay with us.